All right. So how you guys doing? Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Ask ZBrush Live on Twitch here today. Give me a shout out if you guys can hear me. My internet connection was extremely slow yesterday, so hopefully today it's got some of the kinks worked out, and hopefully you guys can see this and we won't have many spinning wheels of death up here on the Twitch stream today. So give me a shout out if you guys can hear me and see my screen. And you guys can start asking questions too if you have any in the Twitch chat as well. So I see we got a few people in here. Some people waking up. So I've finally recovered from the summit. So it is November now, so we're going to start doing these again. So I took the rest of October off on the AskZBrush stuff. I did a few videos, but they didn't go out till I think yesterday or the day before. And so now me and Paul are back to doing the staggered AskZBrush on Twitch, and then also the Did You Know That? So every other week. We should be back on a more regular schedule now since the summit is over. So if you guys are unfamiliar with AskZBrush or just ZBrush Live in general, so this is a stream that we're running here on Twitch. And you can just go to ZBrushLive.com and it'll give you the Twitch stream there. And then on this page, let me just type this in here. Oh, if I can type today. We're going to get all the kinks out right now. Get them all out. And you'll be taken to this page here. Now this is going to broadcast the Twitching that's happening here. But then down here, we also have these different posts that we generate. So these are the AskZBrush stuff, which is on YouTube. We also have different blog posts. You can follow the Twitch replays on here as well. So all sorts of different information you can get here. The podcasts and other items will also show up on this page. Now, if you guys are interested in streaming on our channel on Twitch, there's this nice Creative Apply Here button, and you can submit your stuff. We do have some new streamers that are coming up on our channel. So one is Blair, and I believe she'll be on November 11th. So we have Blair Armitage, and she's another excellent character sculptor who's been doing some amazing stuff inside of ZBrush. And so she'll be live on here on our channel on November 11th. We also have Joe Mena, who's been added to the lineup as well. And Joe Mena has been doing collectibles and figures forever. An amazing artist as well. So a lot of good stuff on the channel now in terms of ZBrush usage and knowledge. So today you have me this morning here, and then later on in this evening we have Shane Olson. He'll be doing his character stuff too, so another tremendous ZBrush artist. So tune in during our scheduled stuff here, and you can find the schedule on ZBrushLive.com, and just go to schedule at the top here and it will list it there. So if you're unfamiliar with AskZBrush, this is a hashtag we are using on Twitch. Let me see if I get this name right. Twitter. And you can use the hashtag AskZBrush and ask a question after it. And weekly I'll go through and look at these questions. If there's any of them that I can answer with a short video, I will answer these. We'll probably go through some of these today and just knock some of these out that aren't really needing to have a video recorded for them. So we have one here asking about how do I pan references images that Shailene, one of our other ZBrush Live artists, was using inside one of her streams. And this is actually an application called Pure Ref. So it's not in ZBrush at all. It's just a separate application that allows you to display reference images, and that's just called Pure Ref. So that's what she was using here. So no panning of reference images inside of ZBrush, so it's a separate application. So questions like this, I'll try to answer quick through here, and then because those don't really need a full video on YouTube for those. For the videos we have on YouTube, we have two playlists you can choose from. So first we had our original AskZBrush playlist here, and there's over 200 videos. So this went through and focused primarily on ZBrush 4R7. So these 200 videos here are focusing on ZBrush 4R7, but they still answer a lot of questions that we get over usage of 4R8. So if you have any questions, I highly recommend you do a search inside of YouTube for just AskZBrush and then the question or keywords you're looking for, and oftentimes there may already be a AskZBrush video created on those questions. So since the new year started, we started with a volume 2 playlist here, and we have when we reached 200 videos on the first playlist, and we released ZBrush 4.8, we started a volume 2, and so this is the new version of AskZBrush. So volume 2, play on the movie, the Guardians of the Galaxy there with their mixtapes. So we have volume 2 of AskZBrush. And in here, we're just keeping adding to this as well. So this is where the new videos will be showing up, and you can just turn these on and go through all bunch of different information. You get to hear me a lot, talk a lot through these videos here. 200 videos of my voice is quite a bit of me talking. So you probably will be all tired of me by then. I hope you're going to be tired of me. But there's a lot of information there and a lot of tips and little tricks that may help you guys in your ZBrush pipelines. In addition to this, of the AskZBrush stuff, the stuff on Twitch here, you can ask questions in the chat. So, I mean, anybody that's streaming, ask them questions. They're usually all happy to help. That's one of the reasons why we have the ZBrush Live, is to kind of give you guys knowledge and get you directly connected with people that are knowledgeable in ZBrush. So if you have any questions, you can ask them stuff, and they'll help you out. In addition to the AskZBrush stuff and the Twitch stuff, we also have our support page, and don't hesitate to submit a support ticket on support. So a lot of times we'll see, things go up online on social medias, and like people are having issues and things like that. Unless we know these issues are happening, or we have a way to, contact with you and see what's causing the issues, we can't really fix them. So we need the input from you guys. And so that's why, we have this support.pixologic.com. You can come in here, submit a support ticket. So if you're having issues with anything inside of ZBrush that you may think may be broken, maybe you just don't know what's going on with it, you can use this as a reference for yourselves as well. So this is just support@pixologic.com. We also have a knowledge base here, which is a little FAQ. And so if we have a lot of questions that are coming through and we just keep answering them over and over again, the knowledge base here may have those questions, so you can search here as well to find answers to any issues or problems or questions you're having inside of ZBrush. In addition to this, we also have our forums, which is ZBrushCentral.com, and there is a tutorial forums and there's some help forums in here, and so you can go to the troubleshooting forums here, and we have a team of people that monitor these forums. So if you definitely have questions, you can try post them in here. Our community is great at answering questions and helping other people out. So if you have anything like that, you can use the forums as well. And then finally, for information and usage on ZBrush, we also have Z Classroom. And so we've had a few questions come down over the Twitter hashtag AskZBrush on live Boolean and how to use it, and one of them is directly related to how to fix Boolean issues. So there is a Z Classroom video on fixing your Boolean issues. So if you run a Boolean process inside of ZBrush and you're getting this little error that pops up, this will show you how to resolve those errors. And the description of the error does tell you where to go, but this video will just kind of more clearly explain it. So if you have any issues with live Booleans, I definitely recommend you check out our free videos on Z Classroom and look at the one with live Boolean fixing issues. All right, so if you guys have any questions, definitely shoot them in the chat channel here, or I'm just going to go random tangents for the the hour here. So I'm going to start off in ZBrush. Let's go over here. We're going to get our Twitch legs back. Choosing the right screens today. No issues. We're going to do it clean today. Clean. That's the goal. I'm not going to be talking and not have what I'm showing on screen. So the first thing I want to talk about today, I have a list of stuff that I've just compiled quickly, is that I want to first talk about the triparts brushes and how to create those inside of ZBrush here. So if you guys are unfamiliar what a triparts brush is, it is a curve brush you can create inside of ZBrush that will have a start point, a middle point that repeats, and then an end point. And these can be created inside of ZBrush relatively quickly, and then they can be used on a curve, and also allow you to, have something like this where you have a strap, and you have the starter point be this, area that looks very, sturdy where it would connect. And then you have the other end point to that, and then you want to increase the length in the middle. So the triparts brush will allow you to repeat that middle part, and you can create this nice curve brush out of it for usage on characters or models or environments. It's all sorts of stuff. So the process to do this, here's just one as an example here, and I'm just going to show you guys how to quickly set this up. So I'm just going to clear my polygroups here quick by just hitting Control+W. And this mesh here was just created with the ZModeler brush, so I just took some geometry and extruded it out and just made this little shape here. And in here I have just one single mesh that has these two other parts that are kind of connected to it. So if I do an auto groups here, I do have some welding here. Hold on, let me fix this. There we go. So if I do an auto groups here in the polygroup tab, you can see the geometry islands that this model consists of. So I have my ring on my top, ring on the bottom, and ring in the middle. Now the key for creating a triparts brush is that you need to have three polygroups on your mesh. So you need to have a polygroup that will be your start, a polygroup that will be your repeating part, and a polygroup that will be your end. So this shape right here does adhere to those requirements. So I have three polygroups on my model. So let's just take this and turn this into a brush quick, or an IMM curve brush. So I'm going to first position it how I want it to be drawn on canvas, and oftentimes this is in a vertical fashion like this. So you have the first polygroup up here, middle polygroup here, and end polygroup here. And next I'm going to go to the brush palette over here, and go to the create menu, and I'm just going to click create insert mesh. So it's going to take just this subtool that I have here. So I go to my subtool palette here, which is this shape here, and it's just going to create a new insert mesh out of it. Now if I use this create insert multi-mesh, it's going to look at all the subtools in the list. But I only want to make this one right now, so I'm just going to use the create insert mesh, not create insert multi-mesh. So when I click this, I'm going to get a new brush here. And you can append this as well if you want. So say if you have an existing IMM brush and you want to add a new brush to it, you can do that as well. I'm just going to click new and just create a new IMM brush out of it. And when this is created, I'll have it up here, and I can now select a new model that contains no subdivisions. And if I just click and drag on the surface here, it's just going to draw out like so. So this is just taking that part or that subtool I had, and it's just drawing it out as an insert mesh object. Now you'll notice that it's just drawing it out normally. So as I click on the surface and drag, it's just taking it and drawing it out. And this is because I have not activated some different functionalities on this brush to allow it to follow a curve. Now you also notice as I drew this out, it's coming off the surface here. And you can control how far this mesh comes off the surface by changing the depth value in the brush panel. So if I go back to brush over here and then go to the depth area, in here we have a embed slider here, and currently this is set to an embed of 9. So you can see as it's a positive off of the 0, so 9 instead of 0, it's going to float off the surface by that amount. So if I increase this to something higher, like an embed of 100, and now if I redraw this on the surface here, you can see how much it's now sticking off the surface. So this embed value is going to allow you to control how far an insert mesh object is embedded into the surface. So if I set it to 0, it's going to be right on the surface there. So the lowest points of that IMM part are going to be touching the surface. And then if I put it in a negative value, it's going to start embedding into the model. So you can't even see it if it's at negative 100 because it's inside the sphere there. And if I take this down to say -8 and draw it in there, you can see now I'm getting more embedding into the surface, but not all of it embedding. So you can change the depth of your IMM parts based on that. And this embed value can be set per IMM part. So if you have a IMM multi-mesh brush that contains multiple IMM parts, each one of those parts, when you select it, you can select a different embed value. And then if you save those, all those embed values will be stored with that brush. So with brushes like the model kit brush, if I just go through and select one of these parts here and drag it out, you'll see that this has an embed of 54. And then if I select a new part like this one and go to brush, you'll see this has an embed of 30. So all these different parts have different embed values. And to create a brush like this, what I would do is I'd go through and first make the brush, and then I'd go through all these different parts and tailor those the embed values for each different part. And then when I save it, they're all stored, and I never have to do it again. So that is what the brush embed value will do for a IMM brush. So now let's go back to my strap here, which is still drawing out like a standard IMM brush. And I just want to go now and activate curve mode. And when you activate curve mode, it's going to take this IMM brush, and now it's going to have it follow a curve. And this can be done with any IMM brush. So if I go back to, say, the model kit brush here, let me just clear this out, and I go up to the stroke palette here. I'm just going to dock it to the side and scroll down here so you can see it. And we're going to go to the curve option here underneath stroke, and I'm going to activate curve mode. Now this was just the model kit brush here, so if I have that fastener 7 selected and I have curve mode off, I draw it, I'm going to get this. If If I have curve mode on and I draw it, I'm going to get this. So you can turn any IMM brush into a curve brush by simply going to the stroke palette and activating curve. Now, if the IMM part does not contain those 3 polygroups and is not set up for a triparts brush, it's just going to repeat that part. So if I select any of these guys and drag it out along the curve, I'm going to be able to repeat it across my surface. So this is pretty handy for adding different details on a mesh. And then you can do fun things like this, where you have snakes or different things on your mesh. So it's a lot of fun to play with. There's also some good processes using different IMM brushes to create hair, and using the curve system for that is definitely the way to go for those items. So let's go back to my insert mesh here, and now let's take this and activate curve mode on this one. And now when I draw it out, you'll see I'm going to get this curve. Let me increase my draw size here so you can see it. And what you're going to see happen here, since I created this as a triparts brush, let's get off the surface just a tad bit, and then click on my curve to update it here, is that what it's doing is it's taking that first polygroup, which was our ring. If I go back here to my mesh, this ring here, and it's taking that as the start, so that is the start object. Then it's taking that middle polygroup, which was the entire strap, and then it's looking at the end polygroup. So as you can see here, now I have this ring, and then I have a repeating middle polygroup all the way through the thing until it gets to the very end of the curve, which I'm going to get another ring. So this is a triparts brush. So it's looking at those 3 polygroups, and it's creating the brush in this process. Now you'll notice that since it was just polygrouped quickly, what is repeating isn't correct. So this is not really what you want, right? So you have your ring here, and then you have this strap, and the strap is just basically cloning itself along the path, but it's not really looking like a strap. So it's not, tailoring that form is how you expect, because in between here, you don't have any connection. It's just kind of ramming the geometry together. But it is repeating that middle polygroup. So if I go back to my object here, now let's divide this up a little bit more. So let's set our 3 polygroups on our mesh in a way that actually makes sense. So I'm going to hit Control W on my keyboard to just give everything one single polygroup here. And then if I zoom in, you can see I have this little dividing area here where I have these geometry starting and stopping. So I just did this with the slice brush and just came through and added some slices here. So I'm just going to select these parts right in the middle here. And now I'm going to hit Control W to give that a new polygroup. And so now I have this part, then I have this part, and I have this part. So now I've got 2 polygroups, and it's just dividing in the middle based on the polygroup division. So this mesh isn't separated. If I smooth this, you can see it's all joined together, and it just has a different polygroup in that area. Now I want to give this area a different polygroup too, because I want 3 polygroups. I want polygroup 1, polygroup 2, and polygroup 3. So I'm going to select the bottom one here by just holding Control and Shift and clicking, which is just going to give me the polygrouping for these items. And then I'm going to hold Control and Shift and drag across the bottom one here, just giving me this green selection box, and I can release. And now I'm only going to get this as my visible aspect for this subtool, and I can hit Control W and give that a new polygroup. And then if I hold Control and Shift and click off the mesh, it's going to bring it all back. And now I have this model set up in 3 polygroups. So polygroup 1, polygroup 2, and polygroup 3. So now let's create a new brush out of this. So I'm going to go to the brush palette up here, go to Create, and do New Insert Mesh. It's going to create another single brush for me. And I'm just going to do New to this. So it's going to be another Insert Mesh brush. If I go back to my trusty sphere here, let's just undo these here. And I draw it out again, you're going to notice that it's just drawing out like a normal IMM brush again, but you can see the polygrouping has changed. So once again, to change it from a normal IMM to a curve, you just need to go up to Stroke Palette up here, activate Curve Mode, and now if I draw this out, you're now going to get this. So it's taking that first part, it's then repeating that middle polygroup all the way through, and then it's applying the end. So this is looking a little bit more what we expect. So now we have this curve that we can create this nice start, drag it out, and then create it to the end. But you'll notice that through here that these parts are now separated. So I'm getting this weird separation across the curve. And it doesn't matter, you can change this all you want, you're still going to have this separation happening. So what I want to do is I want to go back to the brush palette now, and I want to change the behaviors for this brush now in relation to this curve. So I'm going to open the side panel over here by double clicking, and I'm just going to hide the material in here and go to the brush palette, just click and drag to put that over here. and I'm going to go to the Modifiers tab and open this up. And in here, when you have curve active, you'll see that these elements over here are going to be enabled. So if curve's off, you're not going to get this, but with curve active, you're going to get these different options here. So the one is the triparts option. So since we had this curve set up, or this subtool set up as a triparts brush, if this is active, this is going to perform this function. Now if I turn this off and now draw that curve out, you see it's going to just repeat it like a normal IMM. So even if the brush is set up as a triparts brush and you have this disabled, you won't get it working as a triparts brush. So oftentimes if you have issues, you're like, I don't know why the triparts brush is not working. Make sure this is enabled, and that's going to allow you to use those polygroups on the sculpt you created rather than just taking that as a normal IMM brush and just repeating the part. So one little thing there to look for, if you're setting up a triparts brush, make sure this is active. Now next to this we have weld points, and if you activate this, and now if I update my curve, you're going to see those points are going to weld. So now this is giving me that strap that I'm looking for, right? So as I draw this out, I'm now getting a nice welded surface between those mesh. Now you can also activate stretch, which is going to smooth out some of these areas here and also give you a little bit better feel for that curve. And then what I like to do as well is max out this curve res and max out this max bend normal there. And so now I have this nice curve brush that I can draw it on a mesh. You can also extend a curve at any time by just clicking to get this little red line that's going to appear. And then when you have this red line appearing, if you click and drag, you're going to be able to extend that out so you can tailor your curves around the corners. So let's see if we got any questions on this, because I've been just going off on tangent here. Yes, you can use the triparts technique definitely to create eyebrows. So hair and eyebrows are really, really nice. They work well with it. And the one thing with curves is to make sure they work the best. There's one question about having the mesh collide to help guide sculpting, and that's definitely the best way that I like to use the curved brushes with. So if you're doing hair or something like that with a curved brush, definitely look at the surface. So if I take a sphere 3D here, and let's make this a poly mesh, and then turn it into a Dynamesh here quick. And we're just going to mangle this sphere here. So let's pull this out, and then we'll get some clay buildup sculpting here. There we go. So pretty. So pretty. Okay, so let's say I want to make some hair, or I want to have this strap that I just made follow a surface of a mesh, right? So I know I want to go from, say, this part here, and then I want it kind of to flow out like this. Well, you can do this manually. So if I go back to my brush here and I drag this out, and you can try to get it to conform to where you want. So after you have it drawn out, you can go into your curve panel again, and you can lock the start and lock the end of this curve brush. And with it locked, it's going to keep the area kind of locked in. So as you modify this, you see this point here is going to be locked. So it's no longer going to move. And if I turn these off and now play with the curve, you're going to see it's going to move off that surface. So you can use the lock first to help establish a starting point for your curve, and then you can tailor the other end of it, and that one point is not going to move. So this will allow you to kind of deform the curve. So if you're doing hair or different things, you just need to align it better to the surface. So if you want to flow off a mesh, you can definitely use the lock start and the lock end to kind of tailor where you want this, and then it's not going to move as you play with it. But the other option that I like doing more than this to establish where I want to curve is I'll append an object as a guide for the curve. So let's say I had a surface here and I want the curve, I have my sphere. Let's append another sphere here. Make sure that's a poly mesh there. So I have my sphere and I want, this curve to come off the surface. So I want to take it from here and draw it off like this. But instead of going like this, I want it to go out like that. I want it to follow this nice surface. So what you can do is you can take your mesh, just take a mesh and append it to the scene, and then use that as the basis of where you want this curve to attach to. Because the curve is going to snap to a surface, right? So if I just have a dummy object now that is just part of the mesh, like I can turn it off and I get my sphere. So there's my sphere. And then let's say I have this other object. Let me redo my order here because I'm getting myself confused here. So here I have my sphere, and I want to add a curve that curves off. So I'm going to take another object and append it to the scene. And this is just going to be used as a guide for the curve. So this is another great way to use with hair. So if you have a head, you can take a quick sphere, mold the sphere to look like hair or where you want the hair to be. And then when you have that subtool now, you can now draw your curve and have it follow that mesh. And when it follows that mesh, it's going to follow exactly because it's going to snap to the surface. So this is going to allow you to come through and use that as a guide for your curves. So now I have these curves going exactly where I want them because I just did some quick sculpting on this reference mesh. Now I can go and now hide that reference mesh, which is just giving my curves, and now I can turn on my original object, and now I have my original object and those curves are going exactly where I want them to go. I'm not sure if that's making any sense. Let's see if I can get a better example here. Let's go and let's see what we got here. Let's get a tool here quick. We'll pull in demo head here. So I want demo head to have a nice flowing insert mesh strap for hair, right? So I want it to come up here and I want it to flow, maybe do something like this. And let's delete my lower res subdivision here. So I want to do something like this, but I want it to look better. I want it to look, a little more flowy. So what I'm going to do is append in a sphere here. I'm going to take this and get a large move brush here, and we're going to reconstruct some subdivisions on this, or just dynamesh it low. Not low enough. There we go. And I'm just going to move this in really quick. I'm going to turn symmetry on so it's a little bit faster. I could probably use the Gizmo 3D, which would be a smarter way to do this. So we're going to give him some party in the back here, because that's what Demo Man likes. He's not one for the party in the front, but he definitely likes that hair in the back. And so you can do this, you can spend as much time as you want on this to kind of sculpt this out. But basically what we're looking for is just the flow or the aspect we want out of this. So with hair or anything, you can just come in and just quickly sculpt a reference mesh on top of this. So now I have my demo head, and I have this reference subtool that's just showing where I want the hair. So now with this reference subtool, I can select this, and now I can go back to my insert mesh brush. Actually, let's just load in a real hairbrush here. This is one made by Dylan Ekron. This is a curve brush he has set up, and this is the one that I usually go to as my default hairbrush here. And so now I can take my surface and drag this out on top of that, and you'll see it's going to go across that surface there. So instead of me trying to establish where I want this hair on the demo head, I'm going to delete this one time. Like this, I can now establish it on a surface, and so as I draw it out, it's going to give me more volume. So it's going to look at that reference mesh and draw the curve on that. So I don't have to spend time modifying the curve, trying to pull it out to give more volume to the hair. Just make a reference mesh, draw the curves on top of it. Now you'll notice also that as I drew Dylan's brush out here, that it's kind of inverted, so I want to fix that as well. And this can be done in the stroke palette. So if I go to the stroke palette again and go to the curve modifiers here, we have a curve fall off, and so it's currently set to size here. So if I turn size off and drag this out again, you can see it's going to be the same size, but I want it to have that nice fall off, so I want it thicker at the root and then fall off as it goes down. So I'm going to open up this graph here. And in the graph, I want to modify this. So as I'm drawing the hair out now, I'm doing it this direction. So the skinny part is here and the fat part is here. If I draw it in reverse, this is going to give me more of what I want, but it's not natural in how I want to draw the hair out. So I want to start from the roots and go down to the tips. So with this, to fix this, all I need to do is go over to the curve modifiers here, and I just need to flip my graph. So this is going from small to large right now, and I need to go in reverse. So there's this flip horizontal right here, and if you click this, now it's going to go from large to small. So now when I start, it's going to give me the large, and as I draw it out, it's going to go small. So now I'm getting more of that kind of hair style to it. Now if the end is a little bit too small as well, you can still just adjust your graph over here. So I can move this up a little bit and give a little more thickness to that end. So now when I draw this out, it's not going to be as thin. You can add a bulge in here if you want as well, and as you draw it out, you can see it's going to start getting thicker in the middle and then taper back down. So you can play with the curve, and this is going to determine how this brush is going to handle. And all this is a triparts brush that just has curve mode active. So the same thing we did with that strap, And now I'm just adding these modifiers to it to adjust the size of that curve. Now, in addition to this, when you're working with the graph, so when you add a point, you just simply click, and it's going to give you this kind of soft curve here. You can control the radius of that by just clicking this little circle here. But let's say you want to get a harsh curve. So I want it to have this kind of harsh fall off rather than a round fall off. To do this, you just drag off the curve and drag back on, and it's going to change that curve point. So now you see now it's harsh. If I want to go back to a rounded curve, drag off, drag back on, and now I have a soft point. So that is how you can modify your curve in the graph. So soft or hard, you just drag the point off. If you want to get rid of a point, just drag it off and release, and then it's gone. So that's how you can remove a point from a graph as well. So these are little things that are kind of those hidden things inside of ZBrush where you may run into, and then you're like, oh, how do I modify this? And it's just very simple. So even simpler than you'd like even imagine. You're just like, oh, you just drag it off and drag it back on. That makes sense. So now I have the curve, giving me this kind of effect. So that is another little trick there for modifying curves and generating hairstyles for characters. Now your draw size will determine the size of your curve here, so you can play with this. You can embed it in. You can also turn off the snap function for the curve, which is going to allow you to kind of take this and put it more into the surface of your mesh. So you can, in the curve modifier here in stroke, you can turn off snap, and then this will allow you to now embed that hair in the surface. So you can do something like this, and now you can start establishing those roots a little bit better. And you can even draw these curves on a different subtool, so you can have your guide be this nice sculpted mesh here, and then have the ability to hide it so you can't see it anymore. So if I click through here and hide this, I can now see this part, and I can modify it and go back and forth like that as well. So just a little trick there for hair. Now another thing with the brush here that Dylan has that's pretty awesome is, let's go here and delete my curve, is that he's established polygroups or different geometry islands for this. So if I zoom in here, and then let's go and hide the mullet part of my mesh here. Let's go to geometry and delete this. Oop, let's turn off Dynamesh there. So this is what I just created. So this is my single hair strand here. Now Dylan's gone through and he's added different geometry islands to this hairbrush. So if I go down here to the polygroup tab and now do auto groups on this, you can see these are all the geometry islands that this brush has created. So it has all these different polygroups on it. Now what you can do with these polygroups now is, after you have your hair drawn on the surface of your model, you can now go through and you can modify these polygroups to kind of deform this hair a little bit more. Because right now this is like a very long clump of hair, so it's very clumped up. But I can now use these polygroups and kind of unclump it. So give it like a little more relaxing, have it come off a little bit more from that main root of hair. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first select the move brush. So I'm coming over here to my brush palette and just select move. And if I just have the move brush normally and I come across my surface of my hair here and click and drag, you see it's just going to move the entire hair. So longer draw size is going to allow me this. But let's say, let me go and delete this other hair out of my original demo head here. But let's say I don't want to move the entire block of hair. So this is nice for moving everything at once, but let's say I want to add, more randomness, more variation. So I can go to the modifiers tab over here, or go to the brush palette, and I can go to the auto masking area. And in here we have a mask by polygroup slider, and I can toggle this to 100. And now with the move brush selected and this mask by polygroup selected, whatever polygroup I click on is only going to be the polygroup that's going to be respected when I perform this move. So if I have this off, as you'll notice, and then I click and drag, everything's moving. If I turn this on, and now I click and drag on this polygroup here, it's only going to affect that polygroup. You can see the other polygroups are going nowhere. So what this is going to allow me to do is I can switch to a larger brush size now, and now I can start pulling off these different strands a little bit that Dylan has added here to this brush. And so now I can start getting these different elements of hair here. So I can get these, little areas on my mesh now where the hairs intertwine, where they weave, where they change. And it's just giving you a lot more flexibility. So the process for this is usually you'll end up using this brush and draw out all your hair, get all your clumps out there on your mesh. And then you can go back in with this mask by polygroups on your mesh there and just come through and start modifying a little bit more. So adding a little more dimensions to your hair there. So this is a very nice process. I use it quite a bit if I'm doing any sort of hair on characters because it's just, it makes sense and it works really well. And Dylan also has some creasing and stuff set up on these as well. So if I apply dynamic subdivision by just pressing D on my keyboard here, just do always yes to that. And now you can see I'm starting to get this smooth looking kind of hair strands here. And you can also mask by these polygroups as well. You can move them, you can do all sorts of things. So if I want to add just another clump of hair, I can mask that, unmask it, and then even select the Gizmo 3D and hold Control and move. I can now add, another strand off that hair and position it where I want. I can go back in and move this as well and just tailor this around. So a lot of flexibility for hair stuff. So some tips there for you guys. Tangent tips. All right, let's see if we got any questions here. All right, so we have one question about, is the selection controlled solely by the mesh used when building the brush? So yes. So if I take Dylan's brush again, I'm going to select this here. You can dissect what an insert mesh brush looks like by basically selecting the insert mesh brush. Then we can go and just select a blank object, so like a polymesh 3D. We can go to the tool palette and then go down to the geometry tab and now do mesh from brush. And that's going to take whatever mesh you have selected. So with this IMM brush here, I have this multi-thick B selected. And when I do mesh from brush, it's going to take it, and now it's going to generate a new subtool from that brush. So this is what Dylan created here. So here we have the brush. And if you turn on your polyframes here and zoom in, you can see all the penetrating geometry islands that he set up, which is allowing me that functionality of being able to mask by polygroups and pull those items out. So if I did a auto groups on this, you can see here all those different parts there. So he created these basic shapes, and then he removed the bottoms and then set up 3 parts on that. So if I tried to make this into a triparts brush now, it would not work. So you want to make sure that if you're making a triparts brush, you only have 3 polygroups. I just did an auto groups here so you guys can see the geometry islands. So all these little different pieces here that he has. So he has these little parts. Let's go through and select these guys for you so you can see. So this is what is giving that effect, or the ability to take those curves and modify them after it's created. So he did all the setup before creating the brush in the subtool. Then he made it so it had, each of these parts had, let's go here, had 3 different polygroups. So you can do this quickly by just using visibility. So you can hit Control W to make everything visible. Then you can drag out with Control and Shift and hold down Alt, which will hide visibility. So you can hide those parts. Control W, give those a new polygroup. Hide these, Control W, and then when you get everything back, you should have those 3 polygroups set up. Now this would currently break because they're not aligned, but let's say I didn't mangle his brush, just making sure it's a triparts brush like this, and then you go to the brush palette, go to Create, and do Create Insert Mesh, and then make sure you activate that curve option in the stroke palette, so curve mode here, and then after you have a brush that is a curve brush, you can also control the modifiers over here in the brush palette. So you can set it as a triparts brush, you can turn the weld points on, stretch, and you can also change the resolution and the max bend angle there. And that will give you that hair brush, and then you can just quickly draw it out on a surface of a mesh. So yes, lots of interesting things you can do with IMM brushes. Now another thing, let me reload this here. Are you guys bored of IMM brushes yet, or do you want to keep me going on it? Because I can go for little while on these IMM brushes. Any people not wanting me to go on IMM brush tangents anymore? The hair could be used for real-time characters as long as it's low enough. Basically, for real-time characters, you usually want single panes of hair. So you could definitely draw a hair spline out and then set it up and then go and use that later for real-time hair. With the option, this is another good tangent to go into. With the option of real-time hair or using hair, most of the times you want UV coordinates on that mesh. So if you're drawing this hair out, you don't really want to go through and unwrap every single piece of hair. It's a pain. So with the IMM brushes, they will accept or will hold UV coordinates. So as an example of this, here I have just 3 different parts here. So these are just little low-res parts. You may have seen some of these in other AskZBrush videos here. They're my go-tos for, they're my current go-tos for meshes with UVs. So here I just have 3 meshes here. And if I go to the texture map tab here, you can see they have a texture map that's linked to all 3 of them. Now, the UV coordinates on all these are different, but they all fall into the 0, 1 aspect of a UV map. And so I just have a single UV map that has all 3 of the parts in there. So if I did create new from UV map here, you can see that this is just where this mesh is, coming from in terms of UVs. So it's not using all the UV space on the mesh, it's just using part of it, and so each 3 are using a different part of those UV sets. Now, in terms of hair, so let's say I have a mesh and I want to draw it out as an IMM brush. I'm going to use it as an IMM part, but I don't want to unwrap it. So for things like bolts, for things like hair, oftentimes you want to do it once, and then the shape's going to be repeated all over your mesh. So if I have one bolt that looks like this, I don't want to go through and have to, unwrap this, 90 times if I want to do it correctly on this gigantic mech I'm making, right? So if I have a mech and I'm using this part a whole bunch, I don't want to unwrap it every single time. I want to unwrap it once, and that's it. And so with this, any of the IMM brushes inside ZBrush will retain UV coordinates. So what that means is, let's first just create a simple IMM brush out of this. So once again, I just have this single part selected. I'm going to position it on how I want it to draw out on my mesh. I'm going to go back to the brush palette here. I'm going to go to the create menu, and I'm going to do create insert mesh. So I'm just creating a single insert mesh here and do a new again. And now you'll see I have a new brush, and in the preview here, you'll see it's still showing this nice texture. So now I can select a sphere 3D. And I'm just going to make this a polymesh 3D, and I'm just going to draw this out. Now you'll draw it out, and you'll notice that, hey, this is just looking like a normal part. My preview up here has got this nice color on it, but this is just looking like a normal part. So when you create an insert mesh brush, if the object you're creating it from has UVs, those UVs are going to be retained in the brush. It's going to capture it. So it's going to capture those UVs and put it in the brush. So this brush here, this mesh here, has the UV coordinates still existing on it. So in order to get these UV coordinates off of that IMM brush and use it on another mesh, the requirement is that the mesh you're putting it on has to have UV coordinates. So this sphere 3D here has UV coordinates. So you can check this by going to the tool palette, going down to the bottom here to the UV map area. And in here, you'll see if delete UV is active, that means it has UV coordinates. You can also go to the texture map tab here and do create from UV map. And this will show you the UV coordinates for that. So the sphere's UV coordinates are a little bit crazy. I should probably redo those. Let's do that again. There you go. That's a little bit better. But it has UV coordinates, so it's good to go. So now that I have this mesh with UV coordinates, and I have an IMM brush that's stored with these UV coordinates, let's draw this out on the mesh. So I'm going to click and drag and draw this out. It's still looking about the same, right? Well, it's captured the UV coordinates, because you can see I have a delete UV now, and I have the UV coordinates for the sphere and the UV coordinates for this rivet. So what I'm missing here is the texture map that was linked to that rivet part. So the IMM brush will store the UV coordinates, but it's not going to take the texture map with it. So after you draw it out on a mesh that has UVs, that part that you drew it out on has UVs, the IMM part has UVs, and now you just need to relink the texture map. So I'm going to go back to the top here. I'm going to select that rivet again. I'm just going to clone the texture map here because it already has it stored as in that subtool there. So I'm just going to click clone. And when you click clone, it's just going to take it and it's just going to put it in the texture map area up here. So now I have that texture up there. Now I'm going to go back to my sphere here that I've been drawing out on all these IMM parts here. And now I'm going to go down the bottom of that texture map area. And instead of this white texture map, I'm now going to choose that bolts texture map again. And you'll see when I click this, all that color from that texture map is now reflected on all those UVs. Now at this stage, I can keep drawing these out. You'll see they're all going to come in, linked to that texture map correctly. Now that sphere that I had, most of the times that sphere is probably not going to have the same mapping that you want. So I can now just hide that sphere, right? I don't need that sphere anymore. The sphere was just a surface that contained UVs for me to draw that first insert mesh out on. So now I can hold Control and Shift, select the sphere, select it again to remove it. Now I can go to the Geometry tab here. I can do Delete Hidden. And now I just have these parts that are linked to this texture map. And so now I can clear my masking, I can draw more of these guys, I can put them, you know, pretty much wherever I want, and they're all going to come in and they're all going to be linked to the correct texture map, and I can add them all over the place. So you can store UVs into an IMM brush and then use them across. And this is the same thing with hair. If I had a strip of hair, you know, and I set it up as an IMM brush, basically for hair, the biggest thing you want is you want your UVs to, you know, be consistent. So it's going to take that part and repeat it, but those UVs are going to be flat, so you can take a piece of hair and lay it over top and it'll work. Now, since these bolts here this bolt, along with those other two bolts, were also pulling from this same texture map, I can go back to my rivet here, and I can make sure I have all these on here so you can see the ones. So I've got my cap, rivets, and the flathead screw here. And I can create a multi-mesh insert brush. So I'm going to go to the brush palette up here. I'm going to create insert multi-mesh brush. Now I'm going to get a brush that's created with 3 different parts. So I got the cap, the rivet, and the flathead screw. Now I can go back to the original one I was playing with. Since this is already a subtool that has UVs and has the correct texture map linked to it, I can now take any of these parts, and as I draw it out, it's going to use the mapping that's stored in that IMM brush. It's going to use the texture map that's currently on this subtool, and since that texture map is the same texture map that should link to these IMM parts, it's going to draw it correctly. So I can come through and select the flathead screw, and now draw it out on my mesh. If you have solo on, you'll see that if you have dynamic solo on, you'll see that your mesh is going to disappear. So you want to turn that off. And I can draw this out, and now I've added that screw there with the texture map. And I can just come through and add these details to that now. And these are all retaining those same UV coordinates. If I want to use the cap, I can select that one, drag it out. And so now, instead of having to, you know, unmap or re-UV all these different parts on my tool, it's now already done. And so now I can play with the shapes, with the designs, and I don't have to worry about unwrapping these things ever again. So now I have some crazy bolt system here that could be, you know, adhere to a shoulder pad or something for a character. And this subtool is now set up so it has UVs, it's got the different parts. I can turn on dynamic subdivision to make it all nice and smooth. So you can see I've already, you know, I've saved myself a lot of work. So little trick there with IMM brushes. And this will work with curve options too. So if I come up here and activate that curve mode again and pick my flathead screws and draw them out with the curve, it's still going to respect that UV system that I had on them. So as I draw these out, now I've got all these rivets drawn out. So if you're doing panel lines for airplanes, you don't want to go through and unwrap every single one of these rivets. Do it once, and then as you generate them, you know, it's just going to use that same mapping across your IMM brush. All right, so one more thing with IMM brushes here that I want to show you guys. So we talked about IMM brushes storing UVs. IMM brushes can also store polypaint. So this is another thing that's often, you know, not used or overlooked, is the ability that the IMM brush can store polypaint. So let's say I have my cap here, and right now this is using a texture map. So I have a texture map here, and the geometry is currently in dynamic subdivision mode. So I have, with dynamic off, this is what it looks like. And so let's say I want to just apply some polypaint to this. So I want to take my texture map here and just polypaint it. So I'm going to first turn dynamic on, and I'm going to click apply, just to apply my dynamic subdivisions there. So now I have 24,000 points. I'm going to divide it up one more time to get to, say, 97,000. So just a little more polygonal information on my mesh here, and I can delete this so you guys can see what this mesh looks like. So now I can come through and say paint on this. So let's take this blue here and get the standard brush. I'm just going to paint on the surface here. Now you notice when I try to paint right now, nothing's happening to my mesh here. So I've got paint, I've got RGB on, I've got the standard brush, but I'm not painting on my mesh. That's because the mesh currently has texture map being displayed. So it's not displaying the polypaint, it's displaying the texture map. So the texture map will always overwrite the state of your polypaint on your model. So I could have colorize on for days, and the texture map is always going to overwrite it. So I'm going to use this texture map quick just to steal from the texture map and bake it into the vertices of the mesh. So make sure I have a texture map on, make sure RGB is on, make sure my intensity is at 100. And then the polypaint area, I'm going to do polypaint from texture. So it's going to look at the texture map that is here, or a texture map that's loaded over here, and take it and apply it to the vertices of the mesh. So polypaint from texture there. Now you'll notice that I did get a quality change here. So this is with texture and this is without. And this is because the resolution of my texture is higher than my current point count for my mesh. So in order to transfer all the details from the texture map to this mesh, I would need to have a higher point count. Since for this demo here, I'm not going to really increase this, but you need to divide your mesh more to hold all the details from your map if you want it to be an exact match. So that's why we got the little bit of blurry disconnect there that happened. Now I'm going to turn the texture map off just so you guys can see that there's no texture map here. And I'm also going to delete my UVs. So this mesh is currently just using the vertex color or polypaint information. It has no more UV coordinates and no texture map. So now with this, I can come through and just paint on my mesh. So you can see now I can paint here with that blue. And what it's doing, it's painting directly onto the vertices of the mesh. So I'm not using any texture map information. It's just painting directly on the surface. So now that I have this painted on my mesh here, let's create another insert mesh brush with this. So once again, this is just this subtool here, and I have polypaint on. So I'm going to go to the brush palette again. I'm going to do create insert mesh again. I'm going to do new on this. You notice again, I get a new brush created, and I have a preview of my cap here, and you see it has the polypaint on it. So now that I've taken this, and I've now created a new insert mesh brush with polypaint. So now let's go back to my sphere 3D object and make that a polymesh 3D, and now let's use it. So I'm just going to take it, drag it out on my mesh. Okay, so once again, I drew it out. I know I saved the polypaint, not showing up. So there's a few things you want to make sure you have, once again, in order for this process to work. The first thing is you want to make sure your RGB intensity is at 0. If it's anywhere that's not at 0, when you draw this out on your mesh and you have the polypaint option turned on for that mesh, I lied, hold on. It should be only picking up, let's do this again. It's only going to pick up the color that's selected here. So with the sphere, polypaint on, I have my insert mesh brush with the polypaint stored on it, and now I draw it out, you're going to see it's only going to transfer the color that's selected in the picker here. So whatever I pick over here and draw out on my mesh, this is what's going to come across as polypaint. Now if I take this RGB intensity and turn it to 0, instead of using the color that's picked over here, it's going to use the color that's stored. So it's going to use the color that was stored in the polypaint of that insert mesh object. So since this cap had that polypaint generated, I have my RGB intensity set to 0, and now I draw it out, it's now going to bring that mesh over with polypaint. Now once again, this is not UV coordinates, this is the polypaint. So it's the color information that has been baked into the vertices of the mesh. So once again, if the RGB intensity is not set to 0, when you draw this out, it's going to look at the color that's selected over here. And you want to also make sure that the object that you're drawing this out onto has polypaint turned on. So just like how we had to have an object that had UV coordinates, in order to get the polypaint to work, you have to have an object that has polypaint on. If it's off, you're not going to see it. And then to get the polypaint from the insert mesh itself, you want to make sure RGB intensity is at 0. And then when you draw it out, you're going to get the stored polypaint rather than the color that's selected over here. So another little trip there for you guys. It's another one that's a little bit tricky, but it's extremely helpful, especially if you're doing a lot of IMM brush creation and you just want to, repeat shapes over parts. So I went on tangents for this entire thing. So let's go and I'm going to look at see if we have any questions here because I'm getting out of time. So let me check these quick. I got to do less scrolling here, so 1 second. So there's a lot of text here. 3rd grade reading level. Here we go. I'm still trying to get through it. So a question on the curve brush having followed the underlying surface. So snap is the one variable there that you would use to control the curve. So if I go back to a curve brush here, let's go back to Dylan's hair here. So in the stroke palette, You have the snap option here, which will allow you to snap the curve to the surface. You also have the depth, which we talked about earlier, which is going to determine how much it embeds. So if you have snap on, that curve is going to look at the surface and it's going to try to snap to it. And then the embed value is going to embed your mesh that's attached to the curve, and it's going to determine where it sits on the curve as that curve is being snapped to the surface. So the embed value and also this snap option is going to allow you to determine how that curve functions. The picker up here will also control how the depth information is calculated as you draw that curve out on your surface. So you have an orientation and you have a depth. Most of the curve brushes are set up to use continuous Z, so it's going to look at the continuous depth as you draw it out. If you only want to look at the part where you click initially, you can change this to once Z. And what this is going to do, when you draw that curve out, it's going to look at the first point you click, and then it's going to use that as the depth. And then as you draw it out on your mesh, it's only going to use that depth, so it's not going to look at the surface anymore. So there's three different things. You have the depth embed value, you have the snap option in the stroke palette, and then in the picker area, you have the depth area up here. So you have three things that control how that mesh is kind of sitting in the surface as you draw that curve out. And all those can play a part in how it performs. So if you're getting weird irregularities or the mesh is not adhering to the surface well, those things could definitely be off or toggled or something like that, causing that issue. Another thing with how the curve brush works is looking at, as you draw it out on a surface, it's looking at the normals of the surface. So if your mesh is extremely low resolution and you try to draw a curve out, it could have issues trying to find the surface normals of that mesh, and that could also make those curves go in and out of the surface. So the curves will work best on meshes that have some tessellation already to it. So if you have a mesh that's divided up pretty well and you draw that curve out, that curve should follow that surface. If it's an extremely low res mesh, like something you created with ZModeler and you draw the curve out, it's not going to adhere to that surface as well. So let me know if that helps on the curve following the underlying surface there. Let's see, still going through some questions here. Oh, I already see we got someone already answered the curve resolution and the embed, so you got to repeat. None of the IMM demo parts should include polypaint. I think there's one that I missed. Let's go here, because it will also include material as well. So if you have material channel active, it'll also include that. And I think there's one that has. Let me see if I can find it here. It's one of these guys, I think. Anyway, there's one that I've in this brush that I've missed. It's on the list to get fixed. But no, currently I don't think any of them have any polypaint or UVs associated with them. There is one in one of these that I did that does have a material still assigned to it. So if you draw it out and you have a mesh filled with material, it'll draw out and look a little funny because it'll have a different material applied to it. But I can't remember which one it is. But no, I don't think any of the demo parts, yeah, there you go. Pipes 13. So Pipes 13 has material stored in it. So if you draw it out on a mesh that has polypaint active, you can see it's using this silver material here. Another little trick, if you ever want to know what material this is, just take your material here, drag it over, and then click, and it's going to show you what material that was using. So it's using Chrome 2. So Pipes 13 in the IMM model kit brush has Chrome 2 baked into it. So that's one that will need to get fixed eventually. It's on the list. But yeah, so you've got one part in an IMM brush that has polypaint. Yeah, so you can store polypaint in an IMM brush and build a whole palette of stuff with polypaint. So for, I don't know if I still have, let's see if I can find this tool here quick. Wait for it. Maybe I can find it here. So many files. I was looking for this one scene here. We have another example of an IMM brush with data. There we go. Let's see. That one. Let's see what this looks like. It's been a while. I don't know what this could be. This could be anything. So this was a crazy IMM brush that I made for creating a forest. So all these different parts here, just different pieces of bark, and this was all generated through scan data. And then I just took these and made a huge subtool thing out of it, and then turned this into an IMM brush. And as I drew these out, they'd retain all that polypaint information. And for these, for the polypaint information, what I did was I first baked the polypaint information into the surface of the mesh, and then I used Decimation Master in the Z plugin tab here, and I used this use and keep polypaint. And so that will keep the polypaint, but it's going to reduce the cost of your geometry. And so as you can see through these guys, their polygon count is, tessellated because I ran them through Decimation Master, but it's retained that polypaint information. This one actually may have texture map on it because that looks a little bit too clean. Yeah. But that way it allowed me to keep my polygon count lower than if I had a higher mesh, but still allowed me to retain that polypaint information. So you can definitely create insert mesh brushes that contain all sorts of stuff, and, using UVs or using even the polypaint. And then after these are created, you can just draw these out on the surfaces of your model, and they're all going to transfer over. So yeah, you can do all sorts of crazy things with IMM brushes and save yourself a lot of time, so you don't have to repaint thousands of mushrooms in a forest. Or the pine straw. It's another fun one. You only want to paint pine straw once. So question on workflow for Boolean mesh to Substance Painter or Marmoset. So currently right now, the Boolean meshes, the things with them right now is the triangles that are created on the edges are often hard for the UV master to calculate unwrapping. So if you're using Boolean meshes, you will have to process them with either ZModeler or just Dynamesh them at low, and then you can do projections on that to get your details. And then that will give you a surface that can then be unwrapped quickly and then sent to Substance or Marmoset as a low-res mesh. So, and once again, with the decimation option too, if you're doing anything that doesn't really require animation, you can always decimate as well. And you have the option to keep UVs and polypaint. So if you have a mesh and it's polypainted and you just need to get it to an engine quick to test it, it's never going to be animated, things like that, you can definitely decimate that down to like a really low resolution and then just throw it right in an engine. It's another great way just to test things and get things in and out of ZBrush quick. So you don't always have to go through the strenuous process of retopology and everything else, especially if it's not going to be animated. For things like this mushroom, to me to retopologize this mushroom versus just running it through Decimation Master with keep UVs is going to be a lot faster. And especially if the mushroom's going to be in a scene, it's going to be about this big. So there's no reason to come through and manually retopologize this, especially if it's not going to animate. So little tricks like that with Decimation Master too. All right, so I'm out of time here, so I'm going to go through these quickly just see if there's any things I can just answer fast. Yes, Pavlovich has excellent tutorials on stuff too, so definitely check out his stuff. And he was streaming. He was streaming before I was. He was an early streamer. So on Tuesdays, he was always bright and early before I went on. I didn't get up that early. He always got up earlier than I did for the live stuff. But he's got excellent tutorials too. Definitely check those out. Yes, this will be up on YouTube. And if you just go to ZBrush Live, there'll be a replay on all that as well. So for smoothing with the Booleans, you can definitely retopologize it with the ZModeler, or not ZModeler, ZRemesher. That's another option you can do. But if you're going in and you're trying to smooth stuff out, what kind of stuff you're trying to smooth out? Just like the edges? Because you convert. Another process you can do is you can just Boolean, use the Boolean process to generate your mesh, and then just Dynamesh it after you're done with it. So you'll have all the cuts, everything. It's going to keep it in that workflow, and then just Dynamesh the entire result. And that's going to give you a mesh that now you can sculpt on, you can polypaint all over it. So you can definitely use that as a process. So use the speed of the Boolean to set up your shapes, use the speed of the make Boolean mesh to create your mesh, and then just dynamesh it and go from there. Yes, so all these videos will be on Twitch on like the replay, and then if you go to ZBrushLive.com, that's definitely where we do all our ZBrush Live stuff on that. All right, so just to recap this quick, we're going to go back over to my trusty Chrome here. All right, so to recap, so if you go to just ZBrushLive.com, so ZBrushLive.com, this is where all the stuff will be posted up. So after it replays, you can definitely rewatch it on Twitch, and it will also make it to the feed here. So you can see here we have Danny Mac. He's one of our presenters as well. And so after it's gone, after he goes live, it gets uploaded to YouTube, and then you can be able to rewatch all these on ZBrushLive.com or go to our YouTube channel as well. So it's all, you're going to be able to rewatch this again as many times as you want. If you want to watch it 5 or 6 times, have at it by all means. Once again, this is the Ask ZBrush section of ZBrush Live. So if you have a question involving workflows and processes inside of ZBrush, just use the hashtag AskZBrush on Twitter. We're going to try to, since October's over and we're done with the summit now, make this live event should be more regular, so I'm not going to be missing every other week. But I will go every other week, so I'll go this week. I won't be coming back next week, but then the week after that, I will be back at this same bat time, same bat channel. And then in between those weeks, Paul will be going. So Paul is doing his Did You Know That? So another great forum for tuning into and asking questions, and Paul will be doing similar things to what I do. So if you have any questions on anything we've shown or done, just ask us in chat and we'll try to get those answered for you. In addition to this, the Ask ZBrush stuff, which we answer through Twitter here, I'll go through each week and look at the questions and everything that can be answered in a video. I'll do a short video that will appear on YouTube. We have the Ask ZBrush playlist, which is the first one. There's 200 videos in that. And then we have the Ask ZBrush Volume 2, which is focusing on ZBrush 4R8, and there's currently 24 videos in that. In addition to those 2 areas where you can grab information from, you can also submit support tickets to support.pixologic.com. So if you're running into issues, I saw we had somebody with a white screen happening after they moved their computer. If it keeps happening, definitely make a support ticket, and we can look at it and try to figure that out and get you back up and running and ZBrushing away. In addition to this, we have ZBrush Central, which is our community forums. In here, we also have a troubleshooting area here. You can ask questions, and our community will help answer those as well. And then finally, for information and videos on ZBrush usage, we have our Z Classroom, and these are all free videos here. You can go just to Pixologic Z Classroom, and you see there's a bunch of different videos here. If you like hearing my voice, you can see how I made these knives using the Boolean system and surface noise and some other stuff. So there's a whole tutorial on that as well. So all sorts of information that is free and findable. So just Google search, ZBrush, Ask ZBrush, and you should be able to find questions or answers to most of the questions you have. And if you have any new ones you can't find, just use that hashtag AskZBrush. So thank you guys for coming out, and I'll see you guys not this week, but next week. And once again, if you have any questions, use the hashtag. So thank you all. Take care.